How fast should you lose weight for the best results when it comes to body composition? Is there a sweet spot rate of loss that's optimal for losing fat while maintaining muscle? You'll find the answers in today's episode as we lay out the entire spectrum of safe and effective rates of weight loss for every physique goal, with some surprises along the way, including times when you might actually be dieting for much longer than you think, and times when an extremely rapid approach can be right for you. All that and more in today's episode of Wits and Weights. Wits and Weights community, welcome to another solo episode of the Wits and Weights podcast. In our last episode, 169, Q&A with Jeff Hain, menopause weight loss, bulking without getting fat, and cutting on low sleep, I was joined by Jeff Hain of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast for a special co-hosted Q&A where we answered questions on rest periods for muscle growth, managing your diet on limited sleep, what to do if you're gaining too much weight in a bulk, how to transition your training from a bulk to a cut, menopause and weight loss resistance for women over 50, and how to prep ahead of time for inevitable holiday feasting. Today, for episode 170, how fast should you lose weight for fat loss? We are uncovering the truth about the optimal rate of weight loss for sustainable fat loss. We'll explore the full spectrum of approaches from slow and steady to rapid and aggressive and everything in between. You'll learn the pros and cons of each strategy, how to incorporate diet breaks and refeeds for optimal results, and the principles that apply to every successful fat loss plan, because those never change, whatever speed you go after it. Whether you're a beginner looking to lose your first 20 pounds of fat, or you're an experienced dieter trying to get shredded, my goal is to give you a clearer understanding of how to choose the right rate of loss for your individual goals and lifestyles. Now, before we dive in, I did want us to check out some of the recent 5-star reviews on Apple, where we've now got over 125 reviews and counting. So thank you to everyone who's taken the time to submit a review. That is honestly one of the best ways you can support the show, because it lets others see what the experience is, what you've been learning, how people react to the show, and it creates what they call social proof. So if you're watching this right or listening to this right now and you've never ever submitted a rating or review, please just take a moment. I'm okay if you just want to pause right now since you're in your podcast app, Apple, Spotify, especially Apple. Go do the 5-star rating and review. Tap the button that says write a review. Type in some nice, loving words and submit it. Now, if you don't intend to give me a 5-star review, that's cool, but I'd rather you reach out to me directly with your feedback, because I listen to what you guys tell me about the show, whether it's the guests that you might not like or the content, or maybe I have gone too far in one direction or another if things aren't quite supported by the evidence. And I've heard it, and I'm listening to that feedback and continuing to adjust the show to improve quality over time. So what might be in your mind 1 star right now because you just found the show and for whatever reason didn't like an episode or two, and I've seen that happen with reviews where, I wish they would just give it a chance and listen to a few more episodes, or maybe it's just not for them. But, when you do a 1-star review, it really punches me in the gut, but it does give me feedback. So if you're planning to do that, I would just DM me on Instagram, send me an email and say, hey, I don't like the show and here's why. And I'm going to talk to you about it and get your feedback. And guess what? I'm probably going to make a change if it makes sense for the audience. Now, not every show is great for everyone, and that's the way the cookie crumbles, as they say. So here are 3 quick reviews from our audience. First one is from LCDD12. So useful. I stumbled across this podcast and I'm so happy with what I found. I've been looking for actually useful and concrete tips on my health journey and discovered that and so much more. I can't wait to keep listening as I continue my journey. The next review is from @KimStewInspired. Tips for us over 40 women are priceless. What a great discovery for my health. Thanks, Philip, for helping us weed through all the advice, especially as we age, to find the best tips for losing weight and gaining muscle without sacrificing our health along the way. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find an approach that works for the remaining years and decades of our wonderful, vibrant lives, right? Is stay healthy, be fit, have that muscle, but not sacrifice our health or our lifestyle along the way. All right. And the last one is from Fur Fam. And I have a couple dogs. We also have some hamsters and chickens as well. Chickens don't have fur, but still they're part of our family. And this review says, strategy. I really appreciate the strategic approach to health and nutrition with focusing on muscle mass. So incredibly helpful. I couldn't have summed it up better. A strategic approach. That's what it is. We're about efficiency, about doing it smartly, intelligently, time efficiently, all of those things, and just cutting through the noise, right? Kind of like our recent episode when we talked about reverse dieting being a waste of time. I've gotten some great comments on that saying, you know what, I tried what you said and you're right, it actually worked. Like I didn't have to prolong this with a reverse diet. I was able to recover right away. I didn't gain any fat. I might have gained a few pounds of water weight when I came back, but it worked. So that's what we're looking for. All right, let's get into today's topic. I know you guys want to learn all about the various rates of weight loss, why, the pros, the cons, the whole thing. How fast should you lose weight for fat loss? So we are going to start with that question, right? How fast? But another angle on that is how fast can you lose weight and not lose muscle mass? Because that is what we're really talking about. Because if the answer is how fast should you lose weight, all right, there are a lot of factors that go into that, including why the heck we want to lose weight in the first place. I was asked recently on a podcast, in fact, it was the Physique Development podcast with Sue Bush, which is, I think the next episode is her on this show. But anyway, she asked me, why do you think people struggle with dieting, with weight loss? And I think my answer was because a lot of people shouldn't even be dieting in the first place, right? It shouldn't be, or they're doing it for the wrong reasons. And so before we get into like how fast you lose weight, if you found this podcast, if you haven't followed our stuff for very long and you're like, yeah, I just want to lose weight. I want to lose weight on the scale. That is not what we're talking about. Yes, we are talking about measuring fat loss via a loss in body mass, right? Via a form of quote unquote dieting or a calorie deficit, not dieting like the keto or carnivore diet, but just the idea of being in a calorie deficit to release some of that energy. But we're doing it in a way that's both sustainable, right? Not necessarily sustainable for the period of fat loss, but in a sustainable way for life. So anytime you do it, it's sustainable, but also in a way that preserves muscle mass. Okay, not just losing weight on the scale, but actually maintaining that muscle. And for some of you newer lifters, you might even build a little bit of muscle as you do this. And the wonderful thing here is there's a whole spectrum of approaches. We've got, and today we're talking about rates of loss. So I'm going to go very logically from slow and steady all the way to rapid and aggressive. And the best one for you today in this phase of your lifestyle, of your training, of your year is going to depend, right, on the variety of factors. So I'm going to go over each of these and tell you what those are. All right. Before we get into the rates though, and I know you're like, oh, what is he doing? Get into it. I do want to talk about why this whole idea is even important. Like, why do we care about rates of loss and all of that? It does come back to sustainability, the S word. It's the boring S word that's nonetheless the key to everything here. The key to getting to your goals successfully is doing it in a way that builds routines and habits and inherent self-discipline of, occasionally doing hard things that push your comfort zone, but not going all out with the all or nothing approach and not doing things just to get it quickly done at all costs, right? That's what we mean by sustainability. So while I'm going to eventually get to a very rapid approach to fat loss toward the very end, even with that approach, there's a context of sustainability around it, okay, of how we approach it. So that's what we want to do. Put on those thinking hats and critical thinking hats and do this the right way. Because if you lose weight too quickly, which is very tempting for a lot of you, I know it is. I've been there many times. All right. I've done the low carb diets to do it. I've done crazy diets, like to get ready for my wedding. I lost a ton of weight and I just looked scrawny and skinny fat. So it can be tempting, especially if you have a lot of weight to lose. I mean, if you're, 50, 100, 200 pounds overweight and you want to lose that, you might be desperate to do it, right? But rapid weight loss will come at a cost if not done the right way. Right? Because when you drastically start cutting calories or you start doing all this extra training or cardio, your body starts to look for resources elsewhere. Where does it find those resources? It finds it in your muscle tissue. You're not eating enough food. You're moving too much. Your body's trying to conserve and find energy wherever it can. And it's like, well, you're not giving me the food. So I'm going to use some of that muscle tissue. And then your metabolism slows down further. And then it's harder to lose even more weight. And then even once you do, it's hard to keep the weight off in the long run. And I use the word weight a lot today and weight loss at the end of the day, I really care about fat loss. But when you have anything more than a decent percentage of body fat, there's going to be an element of weight loss to lose the fat as well. They go hand in hand, they correlate, right? But we want that weight to be fat, not muscle. The other thing is when you go too fast into a diet, you're going to experience a ramp up in, of course, metabolic adaptation, where your metabolism declines, and the symptoms and biofeedback that comes with that. Hunger, cravings, even mood swings, right? Being hangry. And if done too quickly, those things ramp up too quickly, that's what leads to binge eating and weight regain. We've talked about it a lot. We've talked about body fat overshooting. Check out the history of our episode of our podcast. You'll see episodes on body fat overshooting, on fat loss versus weight loss. I think I've talked about rates of weight loss a long time ago as well. Regardless, we don't want to do it too quickly. On the other hand, if you lose weight too slowly, that can be a problem too, because it can be frustrating that you don't see the change, right? It might happen over time, over like months, but that's, we as humans, we want these quick wins. I don't want a quick fix, but I do want quick wins. And that can be frustrating and demotivating because you're seeing these very small changes on the scale. And in fact, because they're so small from a fat loss perspective, they tend to be outweighed by the daily fluctuations from water weight. And that could be even more discouraging because you're trying to go in this slightly downward direction and you get these big jumps all the time. And you look from, say, Sunday to Sunday and the weight's the same, even though it kind of went generally down, but then it maybe popped up on Sunday again. That can be very discouraging. All right. And that's one of the things I actually deal with my clients, especially when they're newer in the process, where they're like, I see the trend going down. I've seen lower numbers on the scale, but then today I was right back where I was a week ago. And my response is, let's be patient. You're doing all the right things. You're in the deficit. We know your expenditure. We've adjusted the calories and macros. Just keep going for now, right? If there's a true plateau, I'll let you know. And the way we generally do it, with my coaching and in Wits and Weights Physique University, the approach we take is designed to avoid plateaus altogether because we're being proactive, we're getting ahead of it. But anyway, weight loss that's too slow can be frustrating. And so we want to find that balance in between for you that allows you to lose fat at a steady pace while preserving your muscle mass, while maintaining your energy as best as possible, and even, yes, while enjoying your food. That is a variable here. Because if your dieting plan takes you 12 months and you feel like to do that, you're cutting out all the foods you enjoy, that's not sustainable, right? That's not sustainable. So here we go. We're going to start with the very conservative approach, the slow and steady. And this involves losing weight at a rate of around 1/4 to 0.5% of your body weight per week. So anything less than 1/4% of your body per week is probably too slow to really be meaningful. It's almost close to maintenance, and it's going to take way too long, and it's going to be frustrating. So at least 1/4 and then up to 0.5% of your body weight. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's 0.5 to 1 pound per week. Now that may not sound like much if you come from the crash dieting world, or you've done the yo-yo diets, or you did keto and you lost 40 pounds in a month. That doesn't sound like much, but it is exactly what the evidence shows is very reasonable to avoid losing muscle. And at that slower rate, you can have more calories to work with, which then comes into the sustainability piece and the adherence piece of this. Now, this approach is great for several types of people. If you're brand new to this whole macros and dieting thing, it might be great for you just because we don't want to have a massive change. And all of a sudden you have to figure out all the hacks and all the techniques for how do I cut 1,000 calories out of my diet overnight. And that's a struggle and that's a big challenge for some people. So if you're new to dieting, my brand new clients, in fact, if you come through Wits and Weights Physique University, you're like, I don't want aggressive fat loss. Any other form of fat loss, you're going to get a rate that's closer to the 0.5% rather than higher than that. And it might be less. It might be like 0.25% if you're going for something like a body recomp. Okay. So by taking things slowly, there are a few benefits here. One is that you give your body time and your mind time to adapt to the changes in your diet and your training. So each day you're just making these small changes. They're simple. You're swapping your lunch, the side on your lunch. Maybe you're swapping it from rice and now it's going and becoming Brussels sprouts, right? You're adding in a little protein here and maybe dropping a snack here, right? It's like simple changes you can make in the first few weeks. You get used to it. You see what it feels like. You get through the hunger pangs of the first week, because the first few weeks of a diet, at any rate, it messes with your mind a little bit from a hunger perspective. It's more psychological than physiological. Like, it's a lot having to do with the habituation of, okay, I've been eating a 3 p.m. snack every day. Now I'm cutting that out because I'm, reducing my calories. And all of this stuff is great for setting you up for sticking with it for a while. Obviously prevents muscle loss and metabolic adaptation. Here's the thing. Okay. Muscle loss will occur in a diet if you go too fast or you're not training hard enough. So we're not really addressing the training piece here, but the assumption is you are training with the proper intensity and execution, very similar to you were when you were at maintenance or in a building phase. It doesn't really change much. And in fact, the co-hosted episode with Jeff Hain, we talked about that. Like, how do you transition from a bulk to a cut in terms of your training, right? And the key message is keep training as if you're building muscle. You may have to change some of the volume and the programming for recovery, right? Recovery is like a very important variable during fat loss, but the intensity and execution doesn't change. So assuming you've got that, the slower rate of loss at about 1/4 to 0.5% is going to be really nice for not even getting close to that point of losing muscle strength. And you might even see your lifts continue to go up for a while. And then while you're doing this, you can start to develop those new sustainable habits that you can stick to in the long run. Even when you're not in fat loss, a lot of the habits are going to be roughly the same, like having high satiety foods, having high fiber foods, having mostly whole foods, but yes, still fitting in indulgences that you enjoy, right? Figuring out your meal timing, figuring out your workout and peri-workout nutrition. That is a much better position to be in, rather than burning out after a few weeks because you went way too hard. You got some results, but then you couldn't take it anymore. Okay. So I talked about people new to dieting, why that's important. Another population where this is very helpful is when you have a lot of weight to lose. If you have 50, 100 pounds or more to lose, it might be a good idea to go conservative for a couple of reasons. One is, again, it's going to take you a while to get to your goal. And I know on one hand, you're thinking, well, then I want to go very aggressively so I get it over with quickly. But the problem with going aggressively is you have to go aggressively for a lot longer than someone else would have to go aggressively. And that can quickly burn you out. Whereas if you go a little bit more conservatively, you could probably last a lot longer, like more than the math, like if you could go half as long rapid or twice as long conservative, you'll probably find that twice as long conservative is actually much more doable, because on a daily basis, you're eating a decent amount of food and you can kind of get used to that. Whereas mentally, the rapid approach, it's like, oh, wow, this is a slog. It's going to seem like a lot longer time just because it's so aggressive. All right. So if you have a lot of weight to lose, going conservatively can help. The other reason that can help in that population is you have excess reserves to pull from with your excess body fat storage, where your body treats that as extra calories. And so if you go into like a 0.25 to 0.5% your body weight per week conservative deficit, your body may experience that as continuing to be at maintenance or even in a slight surplus. And that's going to be amazing for your training, for your body composition development. It'll probably accelerate the fat loss and the muscle, because you're building muscle and losing fat. And so what'll probably happen is, even though your weight on the scale is going down at a certain rate, your actual drop in body fat is going to outpace that. You're going to drop more body fat than the weight on the scale tells you, because you've gained muscle in the process. So that's a great place to be. And then the only other population I wanted to quickly mention here for the conservative approach is someone who has a history of disordered eating. All right. Now, disclaimer, I do not dispense medical advice. I don't deal with, actual medical conditions related to, or psychological conditions for disordered eating. If you're in the throes of that right now, if that's part of your life now, definitely go address that, work with a mental professional for that, to address it before you get into using tracking and macros and all these things. But if you have a history of it and you've processed through that, and you have a healthier relationship with food now, which is something you want to develop before you even think of going into a diet anyway. All right. And my next solo episode next week is going to be all about 15 situations where you do not want to be dieting. And I'm going to address some of those things. But let's say you've moved past and you no longer have an issue with disordered eating. You still may want to go at a more conservative rate, just to be kind to yourself, give yourself that little bit of room to test the waters. All right. Now, the downside of a conservative approach to weight loss is it takes longer. That's it. It takes longer to see results. And that can be frustrating if you're to get more lean. If you're somebody like me who I know I can go more aggressively, I can go more aggressively on more calories than someone else. And so it would just be holding me back, right? So depending on who you are, typically if you have a higher metabolic rate, you're a more advanced trainee, you're probably going to end up going with one of the more aggressive approaches here. Either way, so whether you're excess weight to lose, you're newer at this, and you're taking a conservative approach, there is an element of patience and consistency in all these approaches, but especially this one from a time perspective. And that can be tough if you've got a busy lifestyle, if you have a lot of social commitments, you like to go out to eat. However, doing it at a conservative rate actually helps in those situations as well, because it's not as, I'll use the word restrictive just from a pure calorie perspective. Okay. And in any of these approaches, by the way, you can take breaks, you can use refeeds. And when you're going at a conservative approach, the refeed or the break isn't that much of a jump from where you are in terms of your calories. And you could see that as a pro or con. It's a pro because you're not going to slow your progress that much by doing it. It could be a con because it doesn't feel like you're really eating that much more food. But that's also a pro because it implies that the amount of food you've been eating isn't that low anyway. All right. Anyway, if you're willing to play that long game and you like the fact that it gives you more calories to work with and you have a decent amount of weight to lose, this approach, this conservative approach, can be a very safe and effective way to lose fat and then keep it off. Because you don't get to that point of like ravenous hunger. You don't get to the point of feeling like you're depriving yourself and you need to binge back. When the diet is done, it's done. You up your calories a bit to recover and you move on. So this could be great. Now, one more thing comes to mind. Just came to mind right now. One of my clients, he has a much lower metabolic rate than the typical man of his size, let's just say. And so for him, any diet is going to be, by definition, moderately conservative, lest he be at a ridiculously low number of calories. So if you don't have a very high metabolic rate, and this applies to a lot of females and smaller individuals, then I'm not going to be stuck, but it kind of limits your options calorie-wise. And so you may have to go at a conservative rate just for that reason. Now, can you improve that over time? I believe so. I believe with a few cycles over a few years of really solid building of muscle and increasing your metabolic rate that way, as well as, moving a bit more, like in terms of walking, low grade cardio, that can help. And then you could push it a little bit more aggressively, but just be aware that you may have constraints as an individual and just have to acknowledge those. Like, that's just reality. Okay, now what are we going to do about it? Now, I mentioned briefly diet breaks, one strategy that makes this approach more bearable because this is a long time-based approach. And that's what can wear on you psychologically, is not the calories so much as the duration. We could take a diet break. You could take a 1 week, a 2 week break every, say, 8, 12 weeks, kind of like taking a deload in your training, and then just eat at maintenance calories. All you have to do is up your carbs for that time and eat at maintenance. And here's a little trick. If you're using MacroFactor, all right, MacroFactor, best food logging app on the market. Use my code WITSandWeights to get it an extra free week on your trial. If you're using MacroFactor and you have it set to lose weight, to go to maintenance for a break, what you can do is you can edit the goal to move the rate of loss down to almost zero. So you're effectively leaving the goal in place, but telling it that you want to lose at almost a zero rate of loss. And that gets the targets very close to your maintenance calories. And then you can just slightly overshoot it. To truly hit your maintenance. Maintenance being your current metabolism, your current expenditure. Okay, so a diet break is usually like 1 to 2 weeks, every 8 to 12 weeks, eating at maintenance. And this doesn't fix anything. This doesn't reverse metabolic damage or anything like that, okay? But it does temporarily halt or reverse the metabolic adaptation that you had. It gives you more energy, right? It probably will feel great in the gym for a bit because now you have all these extra carbs coming in. And most importantly, and this is honestly the most important thing, it gives you the mental break from dieting. You're still going to keep your protein high. You're still going to train consistently. You're still going to do all the things. So consider a diet break if needed, especially when it's a long period like this, because you may be planning for 6 to 12 months of dieting in this case. And this is one of the very few cases where I would say you could almost diet indefinitely if it's conservative enough and the calories make sense, and just punctuate or interrupt it with diet breaks, right? And I've had some very large clients who had a lot of weight to lose. We did it this way. But the amount of calories was, we were still eating 2,000 calories or more, maybe 2,500 calories. And it was like no big deal to do that for a while. So that's the conservative approach. I think I covered everything there. That moves us next into I'll call it the standard approach. So this is the 12 to 16 week cut. This is the standard fat loss phase that I use with a lot of clients. In Wits and Weights Physique University, it's how I design your nutrition plan. Again, for most people, depending on your specific situation, because it is personalized to you. When you join, I give you a plan and it tells you, okay, over the next 6 months, this is what we're going to do to get to the result you're looking for. And if it's fat loss, it's usually going to have around a 12 to 16 week long cut. And so when you hear the word cut, doing a cut, this is like a standard cut. And if the conservative rate was 0.25 to 0.5, I'm going to say that the standard cut is around 0.5 to all the way up to 1%, but most people hover around 0.75%. But we're going to give it that full range because I think there's some overlap between these phases. And again, if you burn more calories, you can go more aggressively and not feel it as much as somebody who burns less calories or fewer calories because you get to eat more, right? Plain and simple. And I know it's not fair. Life's not fair. We're all different rates of loss or different metabolisms. So 0.5 to 1% of your body weight per week for 12 to 16 weeks. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's about 1 to 2 pounds a week. And just to put that in perspective of the diet, I didn't do this with the last one, but I'll fix that here. 1 to 2 pounds, every 1 pound per week you're trying to lose is about a 500 calorie deficit a day. So in the last example, we talked about a half to 1 pound. So that's 250 to 500 calories a day. Now we're talking 1 to 2 pounds, again, for a 200 pound person. That's 500 to 1,000 calories per day deficit, right? And you might be like, 1,000 calorie deficit. I only burn 2,500. That means I have to eat 1,500. Yeah, if you feel like that's sustainable, but if your metabolism is not that high, you may not be going at the full, 2 pounds a week, even if you weigh 200. It might be a little bit less. I weigh about 180. And when I go to a fat loss phase, it's usually around the full 1%, 1.8, maybe even 2 pounds a week, because my metabolism is usually around 3,000. So I can cut it down to 2,000. And for me, that's fine. Like eating 2,000 calories a day, I can do that for 8, 12 weeks and then lose the weight I want to lose. Right now, actually, I'm going at about half that rate. So I'm actually in this range. I'm going at about 0.5% because I went through some shoulder re-aggravation and I was working on some bursitis and recovery. And so I decided to go back to maintenance for a while. I did that for like 3 or 4 weeks. I felt great. I was able to recover mostly. Let's just say I'm 95% there. And I said, well, I want to go back into my fat loss phase because I do have a goal to get pretty lean this year, see what it's like, see how lean I can get. And for me, that's getting back down to like at least 170, if not less on the scale. I don't want to drag it out forever, but I also don't want to go so aggressively like I was doing because of my shoulder, because I'm still kind of recovering. So I'm making it where it's sustainable for me from a training and recovery perspective, not just a food perspective. I mean, the food's nice because now the amount I'm eating to be in a 500 calorie deficit a day almost doesn't feel like a diet, but I do feel it. I do feel it in my biofeedback. My training day today, in fact, I felt really fatigued in the gym. I don't usually feel that tired in the gym, and I did today. And I know it's because of my diet. It could have been a little bit of sleep as well, but I'm pretty confident based on my experience that it's the diet. So you've got to think about all these things. So going back to what this is, the 12 to 16 week cut, I think this is a good middle ground for most people who have, I'll say, a moderate amount of fat to lose, not a lot of fat to lose, a moderate amount. However, there's always caveats. If you have a lot of weight to lose, you can go very aggressive. And I think this works well if you have a high metabolism. I have a client whose metabolism is almost 4,000 calories. And he can cut all the way down to like 2,500 calories. And that results in a 1%, if not slightly more than that, rate of loss. But he's built, he's got a lot of muscle, he lifts heavy weights. I mean, he's got all the things working for him. He walks a lot, sleeps a lot. He's on the younger side, right? All the things going for him. That may not be you. It's not even me, right? So I would say a moderate amount of fat to lose, and you're willing to be consistent with your diet and training. Again, it does require consistency. And a 12 to 16 week period, ideally, you don't even need any breaks. And by ideally, I mean, you've set it up that way, not that you're going to force yourself not to take a break, but you've set it up that way, both with the right rate of loss and also doing it at a time of year That's kind of boring. That's not going to be interrupted with vacations and dining out and holidays. That's sustainable as well because you're thinking ahead and you're planning it and fitting it in. You're not just crash dieting. So I like the standard approach for most people because it's not so slow that you're going to get bored or discouraged, that you're not progressing, because you will see drops in fat over time. Like the trend weight is going to go down meaningfully. But it's also still not so fast that you're going to risk losing muscle. In fact, we know that for the general population, 1% of your body weight per week is the limit for losing muscle. Notice that I said general population. Again, I work with very trained people who are longtime lifters. They can go faster than that. I can go faster than that and not lose muscle. I can go about 1.2. I've tested it. And I have a couple clients that can go 1.3, 1.4%. Now, they don't do this for a full 16 weeks. They might do that for 6 or 8 weeks and then they're done. And that'll be the mini cut we talk about in a bit. But they might do it for 6 or 8 weeks and then taper down to the 1%. It's going to depend on you, but just assume that it's generally around 1% of your body weight per week is the limit. Okay. Especially if you've never done this before. And so even if you're going at 0.5, 0.751, whatever, you're going to lose a decent amount of fat in a reasonable time frame. Right. And ballpark, it comes out to about 10 to 20 pounds for most people. So when you start and you're like, I just got to lose that last 10 pounds or lose that last 20 pounds, this could be the perfect approach for you. Now, the downside of this is that I'll say it requires, in a sense, more discipline. I hate to use that word sometimes, but it's discipline and adherence in terms of the numbers, right? So if you're tracking your calories and macros, this is more aggressive than the first approach. So you can't be constantly going over your calories by 200, 300, 400 calories because it'll just wipe out that difference. It'll wipe out the difference. Now, if you're tracking, if you're using macro factor, you know what the target is. And it's not going to shame you for going over. It's just on a weekly basis, did you hit the, let's say, 7,500 calorie deficit if you're trying to get a full 2 pounds? Did I say that right? 7,000 calories. Did you hit the deficit for the week that you wanted? If you didn't, you're just going to go more slowly. And that's okay. That's fine. Just be aware of it and know that being close to those numbers that you set for yourself to go at that rate of loss is going to get you the result as intended, right? You need to be on top of your macros, your training, your recovery, if you want to get those results. And if not, then one of two things. Either there's some adjustments that have to be made to get back into that window, or it's not the right rate of loss for you and it's too fast right now at this point in your life. And you can back it off a bit. And I would rather you back off the rate and extend the duration now proactively than constantly miss your macros and be over and feel frustrated that you can't, quote unquote, hit that number. And now you feel like you're constantly failing and falling behind this, let's be honest, artificial plan we set for ourselves because it's just a number. It's just a rate of loss. So I really want you to get this message that whatever you said at the beginning, make it reasonable, make it doable. Give yourself some fluff, some conservative padding in there, right? If you think you can get it done in 8 weeks, assume 16, right? Like give yourself some padding and then make that work. And then if you want to go more aggressive as you go along, that might be a better approach psychologically, because then you're going to feel like, oh, actually I'm getting ahead of this thing. That's great, as opposed to falling behind, right? So again, the downside is it does require a little more adherence, more consistency, right? And that can be challenging if, again, you're busy, you have a lot of stress, you have a very active social circle that revolves around food and drink, but you can always take breaks. And we talked about the 1 to 2 week diet break. We're going to talk about another way to take a diet break in a second. If you don't need the break, if you can just stay the course and get through it in 12 to 16 weeks, you'll get there. It's a powerful tool for transforming your physique. That's what we're trying to do here. All right, so the strategy that can make this more effective from a psychological perspective and a planning perspective is incorporating refeeds. So in the conservative approach, we had diet breaks, 1 to 2 weeks, even longer. Now we're talking about refeeds. This is 1 to 2 days. And you could do that every week. You could do that every 2 weeks, as long as your weekly calories are where you want them. So you could say, look, I'm going to go pretty aggressive here. I'm going to go toward the 1%. But I'm going to carve out my Friday and Saturday as refeed days where I eat at maintenance. And so in reality for the week, maybe I'm hitting 0.8%, right? It's like slightly slower, but the benefit you get, the trade-off you get is this mental relief of getting to eat more food. These are not, I repeat, not cheat days. They're not cheat days. We don't do cheat days. Cheat days implies that you're breaking some rule and you're cheating and you're going off of some plan. No, these are planned in. These are controlled refeeds where you're increasing your carbs and eating at maintenance calories. You're not eating a bunch of junk food or just whatever you want. However, you do have more room now to incorporate maybe some other foods you've been limiting, like pizza or something like that, which, by the way, even in the regular day-to-day deficit, you should be incorporating some things that you enjoy on a regular basis and planning them in. So the refeed, there are some myths around refeeds. One of the myths is that it boosts your leptin levels, and which it might for a day or two. It might actually boost it, but it's temporary. And then that reduces hunger and cravings and all of that. That piece of it, I would chalk up to just the fact that you're eating more food. Like you're going to eat more, so you're going to be a little bit less hungry, right? Like, let's just admit what it is. The more important thing is the mental break from the grind of dieting. Now, it may not seem like a grind to you. If you picked a rate of loss that was not too aggressive, but aggressive enough to give you progress, you can just stick with that. Just keep going, right? Just keep going. Or you can shift the calories around 1 week. Not do like a full refeed, but just kind of shift them around. So on your refeed days, just to be specific, what we mean is if you were in a, let's say, 700 calorie deficit, on your refeed day, you're in a 0 calorie deficit. You're eating 700 more calories, mostly from carbs. Okay. And carbs doesn't mean pizza and donuts, although you're welcome to include pizza and or donuts to get to those carbs. It's a lot of fat too, but that's fine. It is what it is. Carbs just means, any source of carbs, usually things like starches and grains and fruits and stuff like that. You're just scaling them up, getting that little boost of energy. Maybe if you time it right with your training session, you can get a little extra performance in your training session. And you could even time it with the social side of your calendar. And that's why I like refeeds is if you have a regular night out with the girls, right? Or if you have a regular family dinner, that is a great time to have your refeed. Okay. So enough on the standard approach. I talk about it a lot in a lot of the other episodes when we get into fat loss. It's typically that. Now we're getting into the mini cut. So this is the third of 4 rates of loss. This is I'll call it aggressive approach. Not the extremely aggressive approach, but this is the, I'll call it moderately aggressive to aggressive. And a mini cut, short and sweet, is, I'll define it in a second, but who is it for? If you're already on the lean side, and that has a wide range. That could be like for a man, that could be anywhere from 10 to even 20%. It's kind of lean for you, where you're like, you don't need to lose that much weight. Probably less than 20 pounds. Probably quite a bit less than 20 pounds in some cases. Maybe it's 15, maybe it's 10, maybe it's just 5. Or you want to get shredded, right? Or you're breaking up a long building phase with a cut in between. These are all situations where a mini cut might work. Now, Jeff Hain and I talked about in the Q&A episode coming out, or that already came out, that we kind of have slightly different definitions of mini cut, and that's why it's important to define terms. His use of the term was breaking up a building phase. My use of the term is just a short cut, typically after a building phase before you start your next one. Technically, those could be the same thing though, right? If you think about it, if Jeff's saying, look, you build for 5 months and then you break up your building phase with this, say, 8-week mini cut, and then you keep building for another 4 months, is that a 9-month building phase with a 2-month mini cut? Or is it a 5-month building phase and a 4-month building phase with a cut in between? It's semantics, in my opinion. So what I don't like to do though, is have you constantly stop building to cut. That is not a good approach. We don't do that. We want to build muscle for at least 5 or 6 months. So once you've built for at least 5 or 6 months, you can call it an interruption in your building phase, or you can just call it a cut after your building phase. We're going to talk about in the final phase here, the super rapid fat loss, about actually interrupting a building phase. So hold on that. But in the mini cut that we're talking about right now, this involves losing weight at a rate of, I'm going to say, usually around 1%, or maybe even a tiny bit more if you're a more advanced trainee. All the things I said before, right? You have a higher metabolism. You train really hard. You're not going to risk losing muscle like some people fearmonger about. You're just not. I've just seen it time and time again. I've heard, experts who I really trust, whether it's like Brian Borstein or Steve Hall or somebody, talk about how, if you're doing everything right, the 1% limit, it's a population level number, and you may actually be an outlier where you can go 1.2, 1.3% of your body weight per week and do it at a decent amount of calories. For the average person, a mini cut is probably just at the 1% and done for a short period. That's really what we're talking about. It's because you don't have a lot of weight to lose. You don't need a long duration, and you can go at 1% for like 6 to 10 weeks. So if you weigh 200 pounds, that's, let's say, 2 pounds a week. 10 weeks, that's 20 pounds, right? But even 6 weeks, that's still 12 pounds. And again, I see this a lot with people who are already lifting, who come to me for one-on-one coaching, or even in Wits and Weights Physique University, and they're like, I just want to lean out. Like, I've been trying carnivore, I've been trying all the diets. They don't quite work. I just want to lean out. What do we do? And we work with them for, maybe 8 to 10 weeks, and we get exactly where they need to be. They're like, all right, I'm done now. I'm lean enough. I don't want to keep losing because now I'm going to lose some of the strength on my lifts and such because that's important to them. I'm good to turn it out now and go back to maintenance. All right. So mini cut, about 1%, maybe a little more of your body weight per week for about 6 to 10 weeks. It is designed to be short and sweet. That's the goal. All right. We're getting as lean as possible in as short a time as possible. We're trying to have our cake and eat it too because you don't have a lot of weight to lose. You're not new at this. You've done it before. You can jump right in. You track it with Macro Factor. We have certainty and confidence of what it takes to keep you in that deficit. You know to eat your vegetables. You know to stay hydrated. You know to eat a lot of fiber, right? You eat a lot of protein, a lot of lean meats, lower fat dairy, all the things. You get your sleep. You prioritize your recovery. And it's this targeted strike to just strip off that last bit of stubborn body fat. And for many of us, myself included, we like to be in the state where 10 months out of the year we're building, and at most 2 months we're dieting. And those 2 months are like your mini cut. And you fit it in the best time of year when it kind of doesn't interrupt anything else in your life. Usually that's something like the spring. You don't have any holidays going on. You're coming out of winter. Maybe you're still bundled up and you're getting ready to be lean for the summer. Very common approach. All right. Now, because of the rate of loss being on the upper end, again, it's suited for people who aren't looking for lots and lots of lbs, lots of pounds on the scale to lose. So again, 10 to 15, maybe 20% body fat for men. For women, 20 to 25, maybe 30% for women. Again, your definition of lean may be higher than someone else's, and that's okay. That's okay. Not all of us want to walk around being like super shredded or have six packs. The other thing is, again, you should already have experience with dieting and training or be working with a coach or, of course, I'm going to plug it all day, Wits and Weights Physique University, because then we're going to give you a very targeted plan and adjustments to do that. Now, the downside of this mini cut is, number one, it's very intense. Okay, it's intense. If you've never done it before and your calories aren't super high, like I mentioned before, the gentleman with the 4,000 calorie metabolism, most people, like most men, are sitting around 2,800, 3,000. Most women are down around, say, 2,400 to 2,600, something like that. All right. You've got to think of the numbers. If you're going to go at the full 1%, it could put you down around 2,000 or less calories or far below 2,000 calories in some cases. And that can tax you physically and mentally. You have a little more strictness with the approach, right? Not restriction of foods per se, but just the constraints are there and you've got to make tighter trade-offs and really prioritize the high fiber and high satiety foods, right? We can't be, the indulgences are going to be somewhat limited. It's just the reality. It's a temporary state. That's why we want to do it aggressively, because it's temporary. It's very short-lived. You might get more hunger, more fatigue, more mood swings on this kind of cut. You're getting closer to that point where you could lose muscle mass. You've got to really watch out with your training, get enough protein, get enough stimulus. Protein's important here because the calories are going to drop and the protein as a percentage of calories are going to be pretty high. And I've seen some people slack off a bit. They get to this point, and because they're just scaling down their food, the protein gets scaled along with it, and now you're not in that great territory for a high amount of protein. Now, do you have to be at the full 1 gram per pound? Maybe not. Maybe not. The more we learn about protein research, the more we see you can get by on less and still hold on to your gains, especially if you have proper intensity, execution, and progressive overload in your training. So if you can handle all that, if that's like, yeah, that's cool, I can do it. The mini cut approach is a great way to get lean and mean in a hurry. So that's why I do recommend it for somebody who's already been through this at least once before. Now, I talked about refeeds. Can you incorporate mini cuts in a refeed? Or refeeds in a mini cut? Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's going to slow it down, but you can almost make the argument that if any type of phase needs refeeds, it would be a mini cut. The more aggressive you get, the farther you are from your maintenance, the more drained you're going to be, to where a refeed, it seems like this beautiful gift you've been given, and you almost look forward to it. Now, again, not like a cheat day. We don't want to be psychologically obsessed with it. We just want to have it planned in where it makes sense for our schedule and for our mental state. So all of these things, doing it this way, is intended to prioritize your adherence to the diet so that you get through it and over with as quickly as you can. Okay, so let's see. That's it for the mini cut, I think. And now I'm going to move to the rapid fat loss approach, which you might call the last resort, because I don't deliberately prescribe this to anyone. Even my one-on-one clients, it's really up to them to tell me, I want to do this, and almost sell me on it, because I know all the reasons why you could do it and might do it, and it could be helpful. But there are many, many, many reasons not to do this. And I want to be very clear on that. All right. Because I have a rapid fat loss guide. You can go to witsandweights.com/free and download it. It's got the entire detailed protocol on how to do this. It's a very special approach. So you want to do it the right way. It is extreme. It is also in some circles controversial, but on Wits and Weights, it's not controversial because we do it the right way, and you've got to do it the right way. And this involves losing weight at a rate of around 1.2 to 1.5% of your body weight per week for a very short period. Okay, usually 2 to 4 weeks max. So this isn't a mini cut. I sometimes call this a micro cut. All right, so let's say you weigh 200 pounds. You're going to go, 2.5, 3 pounds a week for like 4 weeks. So if you just do the math, that might be at most 10 pounds. For most people, it's like 5 to 7. All right. I did this myself as part of a challenge. It was the Shredtober challenge back in 2003. I did a podcast on it. I don't remember the name off the top of my head, but Dr. Bill Campbell came on and we talked about it. It was inspired by his work. Dr. Bill Campbell is really into the rapid fat loss research. He's doing a new study about it, and it's totally doable. And the whole point of a rapid fat loss phase is I want to lose that fat as fast as I can and still not lose muscle and get it over with quickly. So I want to be very clear. This is not for people who have a lot of weight to lose. This is not for 15, 20 pounds, because I've seen people reach out to me and say, I followed your fat loss protocol, but I still want to lose more. Can I keep going? And I'm like, absolutely not. Don't keep going. What I recommend is either taper it down to a more conservative rate and try to keep going and like hope for the best that you don't lose muscle at that point, or go back to maintenance for a while, like for a month or 6 weeks or even 8 weeks, and then go into a normal fat loss phase. Like, don't do another rapid fat loss phase right away. I feel like you're gonna really eat into your performance and your sustainability and your muscle if you try to do this as a default option. All right. So it's not for everyone. I would say it's either something you want to do as an experiment, or you're pretty lean and you just want to get to the last bit of shredded really quick, or it's a last resort. Because listen to this. Let's say you've tried some of the other approaches, and because of, I don't know, let's say your hormones, your body's response rate, your metabolic adaptation, and maybe you don't have a lot of calories to work with. I've had some clients that are kind of like in that box, right? They feel like they're in a box because all the variables are like conspiring against them. And we'll do a rapid fat loss phase almost like as a breakthrough. Okay. It's like, I don't want to use the word shock because that sounds silly, but it's effectively very quickly getting ahead of that metabolic adaptation, even though it's going to catch up quickly. Trust me, it's going to catch up. It's not, you can't do anything about metabolic adaptation, but you're going to get ahead of it quickly. And then because the duration is short, you can meaningfully push that weight on the scale and that fat loss as long as you're training hard during that process and using the refeeds. So very important, this rapid fat loss phase incorporates refeeds by default. So unlike the other types of fat loss where you can choose to include them if you need them, the rapid fat loss phase includes them as a matter of course. So like my 2-week protocol, it has 4 days of dieting, 1 day at refeed, 4 days of dieting, 1 day refeed, and then 4 days dieting, right? To recover and prevent that muscle loss. We also don't want to use this if, again, you're not experienced dieting and this is the first thing you've ever done. Don't do that. Don't do that. This is just going to feed into the whole rapid, what do you call it? Like quick fix, crash dieting kind of mentality. It's not the intent. Okay. And it's not meant to sustain for more than a few weeks. So I just want to keep reiterating that. Okay. I did allude to where you might use this. Like, what are the situations where rapid fat loss is appropriate? So one could be if you're trying to make weight. Okay. If you're competitive and, I don't know, bodybuilding, physique athletes, fighting, even powerlifting. I don't know. you're going to have to try it out. And I had a powerlifter reach out about this who was going to do this. So I need to see how that went. Because what you don't want to do is feel like completely drained of energy where you just can't hit your performance goals for the show. But we know people do more extreme things than that, boxers with the water weight and such, or for military tests, right? Sometimes people do this. We don't want to get into any sort of binge and restrict cycle though here. And we don't want to rely on this and like wait and depend on it. But potentially that's a situation where it could be used and still come out of it the other side, not the worse for wear. Another situation that comes up, and again, I hesitate to mention these, but I'm going to because you're probably thinking about it. If you have a once in a lifetime event, maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's your wedding coming up, and the time is against you right now, and you want to try this, and again, do it the right way, have the refeeds in there, keep training hard to just quickly cut off that 5 or 6 pounds, and you think that's worth it to you, that's your choice. Do it, right? That's up to you. That's a possibility. Again, it shouldn't be a regular thing. Like every year you have some event that requires this. This is a once in a lifetime event. The other place I actually like it potentially is breaking up a building phase. So what you could do is you could say, I'm going to build for a year and I'm going to do a microcut after month 8, right? So 8 months in, you might have gained, let's say 15 pounds or 20 pounds. And now you're going to do a microcut for 2 weeks and cut 5 pounds. It's kind of like giving you a little reset right in the middle of your building phase. And now you've got 4 more months of your building phase. And then the net gain of the phase isn't as large, even though the gain is mostly muscle, right? So the rapid fat loss phase cuts some of the fat off in the middle of the building phase so that you end up leaner by the end of it, having built the same amount of muscle, which is great, right? If you can do that. So that's a way to do it where I think, again, when Jeff Hain and I were talking about it, and he was saying a mini cut in the middle of a building phase is kind of what he was thinking. But I'm talking about even more aggressive, like a micro cut, which some people call mini cut. So just semantics. All right. So if you do decide to do the rapid fat loss route, there's a few things you could do to minimize some of the risks and some of the side effects. The first and biggest one is getting enough protein. I'm talking, if you can, around 1.2, maybe 1.5 grams per pound. So like blow past the 1 gram per pound, just to be 100% sure that that is not the bottleneck when it comes to your muscle. Second, all right, you've got to keep your training intensity up there. Intensity, I mean your load, your volume, or your proximity to failure, and of course, training for progressive overload and training for building muscle. Even if you can't technically do it because you're deprived of all this energy, you act as if you're doing it. And this is where cardio and high rep type work, I don't like high rep work. I don't think there's necessarily a need for that in fat loss. Cardio is an interesting one. That could be a dial that you would use during this phase in either direction. Either don't do too much because it's just going to totally burn you out and you're going to feel even more drained, or incorporate some of it, low and medium, even a little high intensity cardio, to kind of accelerate it even further and potentially increase your expenditure where you're now burning even more calories, or you could do it on a little bit less. However, big caveat there is as you're doing this rapid fat loss phase, it's so short, you don't really have time to see your expenditure change and respond to that. And so when I set up these protocols, I do it as a fixed protocol for the whole 2 or 3 weeks. I don't worry about what my expenditure is doing because it's not long enough to be able to react properly to that. So, and then the refeeds every 4 days, 5 days. I like them 4 days dieting, 1 day refeed. That's what I like. So make sure the refeeds fit on the days you want, where you want them. Okay. And then of course, get ready to come out of it. Like if you listen to my episode, reverse dieting is a complete waste of time. Even after a big or an aggressive microcut where you've lost 5-7 pounds and your expenditure might have tanked, it's probably going to tank somewhat. Go right back to your expenditure right away or a little bit higher so that you recover very quickly. Okay, so I know this is a solo episode. It's actually going a little bit long, but I think it was worth it because we covered all of these fat loss approaches in much more detail than I sometimes have a chance to. And the question is, how do you choose the right one? Well, we've already talked about all the factors, so I hope that you heard your scenario in one of those, including your starting body composition, your body fat, how much weight you have to lose, what is your experience level, both with dieting, but also with building muscle and training, right? And by dieting, I mean not that you've done diets, but proper nutrition, macros, micros, hydration, supplementation. It's all in place And ideally, you've gone through a standard fat loss phase before you try something more aggressive. And of course, your lifestyle and your goals. Like, what are your goals? What's your time frame? What does your schedule look like? How do you feel when you eat this way? And so on. So if you're, again, new to dieting, you have a lot of weight to lose, I recommend a more conservative approach. And then gradually, as you get more experience, you can go with more aggressive approaches. And that's kind of a cool way to mix it up, right? It gives you time to build the sustainable habits. You don't get into the pitfalls of trying to go too quickly. And then as you get leaner and your body composition improves, you get this fun chance to mix it up and try a little more aggressive. And you could always dial it back. There's no right or wrong. Okay. And regardless of what you choose, principles. Remember the principles. Prioritize your training to preserve muscle mass. Eat enough protein to preserve muscle mass and for your body composition and for satiety. Take breaks or refeeds as needed so that you don't get burned out, so you get psychological relief, and you continue to maintain your progress. Even though you're slowing it down a tiny bit, you get to continue and create that long-term adherence. And then the last thing is I want you to be honest with yourself about what is sustainable for you long-term, right? Don't be afraid to adjust your plan if it isn't working, okay? And there you have it, right? So the spectrum of weight loss or fat loss rates how to choose the right approach. It's not a one size fits all. What works for the person next to you that you're watching and is telling you this is the perfect approach that worked for them, it may be the completely wrong approach for you. And so you've got to find that balance between making the progress, but still enjoying your life, still maintaining your health. And if you take one thing away from this episode, let it be this: sustainability is king or queen when it comes to fat loss, short-term and long-term. So I don't want you to get caught up in the hype. I know you heard rapid fat loss in here, like, ooh, I could actually do that and I can do it the right way. When rubber hits the road and you actually do it, it's tough, right? So start slow and build to where is a sweet spot for you. And along the way, you're building habits. These are long-term habits, okay? Experiment, collect data, use macro factor, join the Wits and Weights Facebook community. And if you really need help to accelerate it and customize it for you, I want you to join Wits and Weights Physique University. We are open for enrollment. Link is always in the show notes. All right. I hope you have a better understanding of your options for how fast you might lose weight. And again, if you want to apply these with a custom plan for you, with a 6-month outlook, with a proper rate of loss, and then you get weekly check-ins and live coaching calls, monthly workout programs to take your physique to the next level, I definitely invite you to check out Wits and Weights Physique University, because here's what I did. I took the best of one-on-one coaching and I rolled it into a community-based, semi-private group coaching program that gives you expert guidance, accountability, support, so that you get through any plateaus. In fact, you never hit them. That's the goal. You can build muscle, you can lose fat, like the way that we talk about here on Wits and Weights, with no restricted diets, with no excessive cardio, without sacrificing who you are and your time and your lifestyle. And the university's been growing fast since we launched in April, and we're looking for some more brave souls to jump in and accelerate their path to a dream physique. And that's why I recently updated the pricing structure to make it even more affordable. So if you want to learn more about that and enroll, just head to witsandweights.com/physique or click the link in my show notes. Again, that's witsandweights.com/physique to learn about WWPU and join today so we can get you some clarity and a custom nutrition plan so that you can start implementing right away what we talked about today to build the lean, muscular physique you deserve. Again, the link is in my show notes, or go to witsandweights.com/physique. Okay. In our next episode, 171, big butts, strong butts. We love them all. How to train your glutes with Sue Bush. We are talking about a fun topic, especially for the ladies out there, and that is how to build strong, functional, and aesthetically pleasing glutes. Why do we love butts so much? What are the benefits of glute development beyond just looking good? And what are the most effective training strategies, exercise selection, and programming considerations for optimal results with those glutes? Now, Sue and I were contributors to the March issue of Body by Science, speaking of Dr. Bill Campbell. So she had me on her show recently, the Physique Development Podcast. And if you missed that, go look her up and give it a follow. That's, again, the Physique Development Podcast. And of course, make sure to hit follow right now in your podcast app for this podcast, Wits and Weights, to get notified when Sue's episode comes out, and also support the show by increasing our number of subscribers. As always, stay strong, and I'll talk to you next time here on the Wits and Weights podcast.